Hello, everybody. I'm Chuck Wiger, State Senator, and today we're going to talk about a vital interest issue. It involves water gremlin and the pollution that has been emitted from their operational plant in White Bear Township. There's been a lot in the news in terms of the tons of TCE trichloroethylene that has gone into the air, into the wetland area, and there's tests being measured, and the people that have responded to this issue in the neighborhood areas is they formed an organization called the Neighborhood Concerned Citizens Group. And with me today I have Sherry Smith. Welcome, Sherry.
Thank you very much,
And
Senator.
Kelly Tapkan.
Thank you, Senator Wiger.
And you're a part of the Neighborhood Concerned Citizens Group. As I mentioned, the legislature has been involved in this in terms of recommendations that you have come forward to ban TCE. Mm-hmm. There's been so much in the news, but first I'd like to just have each of you introduce yourself and tell us why you are so passionately involved in this issue. So we'll go first with Sherry.
I'm Sherry Smith, part of the Neighborhood Concerned Citizens Group. I'm actually a board member on the board. I will tell you that when we first understood or heard of this in January of 2019, there were a lot of us that were outraged,
Yes.
Profoundly concerned, and we met up with each other at community meetings, at presentations from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and actually at Water Gremlin community meetings, and decided that we were stronger together.
And you live in that area. There's the so-called mile-and-a-half zone that they looked at as a potential area that could have a bigger impact, but
yes.
You live
I live a quarter
area.
mile from the plant. I look at their sodium vapor lights off my deck.
Okay. And Kelly, Tapkan.
Thank you.
You heard about this in January as well.
We did hear about it in January as well. There was a community meeting on March 7th. And
at the high school, probably?
At the White Bear High School,
where many of
exactly.
us actually met, and hundreds of people were there.
That's
asking
right.
What happened, why?
What happened and why. And I think what was very striking to our community is how long these issues with emissions were occurring. And our concern continued to build, and we formed this Neighborhood Concerned Citizens Group with two other neighbors, with Sherry Hastings, who is our president, yes, and with Lee Thiel, and we've continued ever since.
And Water Gremlin, has been in business for a number of years. The public has, read about them. We had learned about TCE, trichloroethylene. Had you heard of this chemical before the news about the emissions?
No, and I know more about TCE and dichloroethylene, DCE, than I ever would have imagined knowing.
So we'd like to just give the explanation of what is TCE, and as a policymaker, we're trying to ban this chemical film, and there's some limited exceptions, but basically, the House of Representatives has already passed this to put a ban. We're on a scale to try to get this banned at the federal level, but that stopped just a couple of years ago for whatever reason. But what has been the concern about TCE?
It is a highly toxic, carcinogenic chemical that is used in manufacturing. If it was used appropriately, it probably wouldn't be as concerning, but it is not being used appropriately by Water Gremlin, and we suspect by other companies.
So there's been emissions. There's a permit that is issued by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, mm-hmm, and where this is monitored. A lot of this is on an honor system or a voluntary, in terms of what's going to be reported, but you guys have done some digging, and I believe there's a chart here. Maybe one of you'd like to explain what the emission limit is for the permit, and then what has actually happened.
Sure. Right now, Minnesota is dependent on a system of self-reporting, which requires companies to accurately self-report. And what we see here on our graph is that Water Gremlin had a permitted level of 10 tons per year. And every year over a 17-year period between 2002 and 2018, they exceeded that permitted level. And Senator Wiger, it wasn't by a little bit, it was by a lot. So we're talking about 6 times, 7 times, 8 times. So on our graph here, what you'll see is a red line that indicates how much they were permitted.
On the bottom, it
On the
shows
bottom.
what the citizen regulatory body, representing the public, they've put in this limit. That's the red line.
Right.
And the blue line shows each and every year above the 10 ton per year limit. And that's what Water Gremlin emitted. And so it's not just significant that they emitted a lot of TCE, but the length of time that this was emitted is significant.
The citizens of the 3 areas we represent, White Bear Lake, White Bear Township, and Gem Lake, have been exposed to this for more than 17 years in significant, measurable, profoundly concerning amounts.
And TCE is both a volatile organic compound, a VOC, and a hazardous air pollutant, an HAP, a HAP. And we don't yet know what that impact is. And in a system of self-regulation where this can happen over such a long period of time, it really indicates that there is an issue and that we need to consider why that's happening, because it doesn't just impact the White Bear area. There are going to be other water gremlins. So how is this happening? Why is it happening? So we need to fix it and keep our community safe, but also keep other communities safe.
Yeah, that's so important. And it's not just the White Bear area where you have had the exposure, but it could be anywhere in Minnesota, it could be anywhere in America. And that is what you're fighting for right now. And
Absolutely.
Perhaps there's international impact for this as well. And we're looking at a fine that's been paid, several million, but and they have stopped using TCE. However, you tell us about the alternative chemical that Water Gremlin has been using after the fine, and what has happened now.
So before I talk about TCE, I want to thank you for championing the effort at the legislature last year to ban TCE. Minnesota would have been the first state in the union to ban TCE.
Well, thank you. That's our job, and we've tried our very best to have a bipartisan effort to do that, and we will continue to do that to get it right. So thank you, and there's
We're going to
some
stand
other
with you.
provisions. So, well, thank you.
So trichloroethylene, TCE, is unfortunately not well studied. It is our understanding that it is almost just as bad as TCE, and yet the emission levels that were set permittable by Water Gremlin of DCE are actually 10 times higher than they were allowing of TCE, and they've even been exceeding those emission levels since March of 2019.
So I know it gets complicated with these chemicals and what the impact is, but the bottom line is that the public is still at risk. And now there has been most recently a call to close the plant, or that part of the operation.
Yes.
Time out. What is happening? And it's in dispute. And as we talk, I think maybe it's getting lawyered up, and we shall see. But the fight's going to go on.
Mm-hmm.
With DCE, it's only been used since March 1st, and they've actually already found it in the soil,
Again,
in the
just
soil
make sure,
vapor.
DCE.
Correct.
And
I know
so
they sound very
We
similar.
talked about TCE, the
Right.
trichloroethylene, but the DCE, which the Pollution Control Agency, they did agree, with that, but in monitoring the impact, it is still at a unacceptable emission level.
So, and we'd also say that DCE, it has a very similar chemical structure to
Yes.
TCE. So the difference between DCE and TCE is it's less studied. So we as a community question whether the limits have been set at an appropriate level.
Yes.
They've been set at an appropriate level based on what we know, but if the chemical hasn't been studied, does that keep us safe?
Yes.
So particularly when water gremlin continues to emit at the levels that they have. It's been stated last week by the MPCA that the pollution control equipment is not adequately controlling the emissions of DCE. And in addition, as part of the March 1st stipulation agreement that was signed, they were required to do additional testing. And in that testing last week, it was determined that there were multiple chemicals that were found in soil vapor, which is TCE and DCE were both found in the soil vapor and the groundwater, not the drinking water, but the groundwater around water gremlin. And lead was found in sediment, groundwater, and around the facility. So these things are very concerning to us, and they're very concerning to the MPCA as well, which is why they called for water gremlin to voluntarily shut down. Now, unfortunately, at this point, they haven't done so yet. And so it'll be interesting to see what the next few weeks holds.
Yes. And when the legislature meets again, most likely in February 2020, I don't know if there'll be any special session, but potentially this matter of the public interest to infect, as you know, we tried to address this in special session as well. This is a public outrage right now as to what's happening, and especially when it's in your neighborhood. If they go to the website, they'll find out the most recent information. I believe all you fill in a link, you can be on an email notification list
Yes.
as well.
Absolutely. And find out about all of the recent stories in the media.
Yes.
So that it's an easy link to go to the stipulation agreement to learn more about that, to see what has been reported on again in the media, or to find out what our point of view is. So we've really tried to capture that on our website, and it's the best one resource to find out the basic background of our organization. And again, that's wbancccg.org.
Good. For those neighbors that are ill, that they're trying to see, is there a causal relation from this 17-year unlawful emission that has been occurring? I know they've been talking to lawyers to try to find out. Anyone would. You're trying to find out your family, but is there much discussion amongst persons that feel they may be a victim?
There's a lot of discussion, and there's a lot of concern. One of the challenges with TCE is that it breaks down very quickly in the human body and in the air, so it's very difficult to.
It's like within a week or so,
I think at the most, it's very quickly, and so it's difficult to prove a causation of something like cancer, but it's also other health issues are linked to TCE, like immunological and neurological disorders. So there's a lot of concern within our community. So there's the question that unfortunately citizens that are ill have to ask themselves, like, is the air I'm breathing in my community making me sick? That my home where I've raised my family, is it making my family ill? We don't have an answer to that, but I would say that water gremlin, having emitted this level of a toxic, proven carcinogen over such a long period of time, is, if it's intentional, it's criminal. If it's not, it's just negligent. I mean, they're not. When you're permitted, you're expected to know how to use these toxic chemicals. And it's a 17-year period. It's not a 6-month period. It's not a 2-month period.
This wasn't a one-time
a
episode.
whoops.
It's been a generation of neglect.
It's a generation.
One of the things that we are in support of and trying to advocate for is an appropriate health study for the community, for those that have been impacted by what we're looking at right here.
Yeah. Good. Thank goodness that you have formed your organization, because you are the citizen watchdogs, and not only for the White Bear area, but just the whole state, the whole, the region that's impacted, and it can happen to anyone. So we thank you for it.
It is happening. It's happening in Ripon, California. It's happening in Franklin, Indiana.
Yes.
And all tied to TCE. There are stories all over the news today, very relevant.
Great. Well, we shared the website info, and I know people will continue to be actively engaged. Just on a personal note, Sherry, tell me briefly your background, and are you from the area?
I have lived in White Bear Lake since 1993. I raised my family there. This is not my work. I have made it my work.
Okay. Would you like to share what you're doing your other...
I spent 30 years working for an airline, the local hometown airline that ultimately moved to Atlanta.
Okay.
And I couldn't, so now I'm doing something different with actually interpretation and translation services in the healthcare business. But this is my other major job.
Yes, and but a lot of passion that you're putting into it. And Kelly, are you from the area?
So I'm originally from the Cleveland area. I've been in Minneapolis for about the past 15 years and moved to White Bear Lake 5 years ago with my husband, Baskin. And we live there with our 3 dogs. And love the Twin Cities very much, and plan to continue living here for quite some time.
Wonderful. Any concluding advice you'd like to share with our viewers about where things are at and moving ahead?
From my perspective, I would like to remind your viewers that this isn't just a White Bear issue. TCE is a nasty chemical. It is used still by a lot of businesses because it's cheap and it works, but it's also very toxic, and it's something that we need to consider because it can, again, impact other communities as well.
Yes.
So the message that I have for the viewers is, as somebody coming into this with no knowledge, nothing other than I live here, which is kind of how this all started in January, I've been just astonished that those that I believed were out there protecting me, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, even the EPA, that you cannot rely upon someone else to look at this, evaluate this, and do it for you, because there's a lot of misses.
Well, ladies, thank you for your crusading efforts. I wish you continued success. And everybody,
Thank you.
Let's support each other. Let's get to the bottom of this.